Hey, everybody, and welcome to another edition of The Split, the young adult book review podcast for readers and writers. I'm Bryan Cohen, the author of the Ted Saves the World series. That's Robert Scanlon, who is grooming himself. He is the author of the Dreamer Chronicles. Robert, you look absolutely ravishing today.
Oh, why, thank you, Bryan. I do have a bevy of, or at least maybe one person lining up to marry me later. So,
Ooh.
oh, wait, I'm already married with her.
Yes. Darn. You must be just have the imagination of someone who dives into a story like The Prince by Kira Cass, the novella that we are focusing on today. That is a prequel and then an interquel to the. I think there's a term for it, but I like that term. To the selection, which we previously reviewed on the show. So The Prince is vaguely a standalone story, but not really. I'm interested to hear what you think about it after we have done a summary. What do you say?
Oh, yeah.
Should I summarize this
Go and summarize.
tiny book?
Summarize the tiny book.
Before 35 girls were chosen to compete for Prince Maxon's heart on the selection, he was just a boy trying to come to terms with a life that would never be the same. Did he know love before America came into his life? Did he consider sending her home after her surprise assault? All two questions will be answered in this 64-page novella set in the world of the selection.
And should it be read before or after? Oh, look, I think you should read it after. And
I think you should read it after. It doesn't make sense unless you read it after.
It really doesn't. No, not at all. I mean, it doesn't make much sense anyway, but then we'll come to that. We reviewed the selection in episode 20, so I'm just letting folks know if you'd like to go and listen to the podcast for the selection. That was episode 20.
And on that episode, it was one of the few where we were split,
yes.
like the show's name.
Yes.
We were actually split. I liked it. I recognized the book's faults, but I really enjoyed the plucky heroine and the early stakes that came from her relationship with Aspen. Those were things that I enjoyed. And because so much was told from America's perspective, and I liked the character a lot, I was probably willing to overlook some of the book's faults, whereas you, Robert, had some different feelings about that book.
Yeah, I did not like that book at all. And so, I was forced to read this novella due to somebody's suggestion.
It was me. I forced Robert to do it.
It's a good idea, though, to review a novella, to see, okay, how does this work? If you're a keen reader of a series, are you going to be disappointed by a novella? Are you going to be inspired by a novella? Will it fill in some gaps for you? I mean, whilst I didn't like the selection particularly, I got to say I like this even less. And Prince Maxon, who is the main character in this book, it's told from first-person perspective, is really just he's a supporting character, although a main supporting character in the selection. And I quite liked him in the selection. He seemed to have some good insights into the ladies, and even though he was inconsistent, and then 1 minute he had bulging biceps and the other minute he's looking kind of sleek and groomed, whatever, he at least was part of the appeal. But he's everything in this book, and he has no appeal for me whatsoever. Zero, zilch, nothing. And and as I said at the end of I usually write a summary as well, Bryan, as you know, just to get me in the habit of writing summaries. They're nowhere near as good as yours. But I ended with this. Told from Maxon's point of view, this novella is best read after the selection and when you have a few hours of your life to throw away.
It only took me about an hour and 15 minutes.
Exactly. I'm really sorry, Kira Cass. Come on this show. Just, this is not a personal attack.
There were things I liked in this book.
Oh my God.
There were things I liked in this book. But I feel like there just wasn't much story to tell.
No.
and that showed throughout. I mean, there's seven. This is an interesting thing in the audio version. There were 8 chapters, and it said before the 7th chapter that the last 2 chapters were exclusive. Were there 6 chapters in the text or 8? Do you recall?
I have absolutely no idea how many chapters there were. I know it finished at about 80% because there's a preview for something which is silly, really, because it doesn't make any sense if you haven't read the selection. So I didn't even bother with the free preview.
Well, anyway, it doesn't matter.
Can't remember.
But
yeah,
I enjoyed seeing why he liked the terrible girl, the model whose name escapes me. I enjoyed seeing why he actually cared about Celeste. And I enjoyed some of his inner thoughts when he approached America. The thing with the French princess was awful. It was terrible. It was so bad. It was this girl who we didn't care about, who had deep feelings for the prince, and he didn't care about her.
And he didn't even know she had deep feelings.
He didn't even know she had deep feelings, so there was no background to show this. There was nothing to root us in it to care. And the girl was such a throwaway that it was a disappointing scene. And that scene, I guess, was the inciting action for this story. So when the inciting action for the story is crappy, then it's really tough to like the story. So I think here's the question I want to ask you, and anyone. Was this marketing, or was this a story that she felt the urge to tell? Because there are now, I counted 4, there could be 5. There's a novella from the prince's perspective. There's a novella from Aspen's perspective. Mm-hmm. There's a novella from the queen's perspective. There's a novella from one of the other participants' perspectives. So there's 4 novellas. A new novel is just coming out. The 4th book in the series, which is a sequel 20 years later.
Oh, wow.
And there's a novella coming out, I think, that's based off of the 2nd or 3rd, the 2nd or 3rd book. So it's really interesting how she's done this series, and I think it's almost an indie style, an indie style promotional method. Because aside from Divergent, I've seen this with Divergent, people really pushing the novellas to not cash in necessarily, but really go all in on the audience and the excitement. And there were opportunities for the selection, but it was also kind of, hey, let's publish every couple of months so that people still remember us. And so there's a definite marketing component to doing prequel novellas, interquel novellas, sequel novellas. This seems very marketing and not very story-driven, just because there wasn't much to the story. And maybe she just messed up. Maybe she wrote a crappy story. I've written crappy stories.
Well, yeah.
I have.
Yeah. Who hasn't?
We all have.
Yeah.
And Stephen King has written bad books. I mean, so you could just have an off day. Yeah. So, well, what do you think? So I blabbed for a while, but what do you think?
Well, no, there's some really good thoughts in there. And you know, you kind of, it shows how enmeshed sometimes the reader's perspective can be tainted by the writing and the marketing as well. Because, as you say, there's not much to the story. It's debatable whether it really even is a story. To me, I wrote down, I said, this is awful. You know, it's a story that you'd find in a kind of really low-level women's magazine that you might pick up in a doctor's waiting room because you had nothing else to do, and written as a serial. Because, you know, Maxon's, he's really unconvincing as a male. I mean, really, it's just, men just don't think like that. And he's a total idiot. compared to how he comes across in the selection, which is actually got a few smarts about how he works with the ladies. Now, maybe that was deliberate, that Kira Cass wanted to show that the way that he was perceived on the outside wasn't quite like the tortured inside that he had. But he wasn't just tortured; he's just an idiot, And it tortured me. It's a quick read, thankfully. So and I wrote this. Most of how Maxon thinks and feels, he tells us. Fascinating. So there's not a lot of show in this book either.
Yeah.
It's really just a narration, and it could have been condensed to about 3 paragraphs that was backstory from the selection.
And maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
Maybe it was stuff that was in the selection that was cut. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
And so that kind of brings me a little bit into the writer's perspective thing, where you're talking about, was this marketing? Should we move into the writer's perspective, actually?
Let's do it.
Yeah. Because, as you say, you gave quite a long explanation there of what may have happened, and triggered a thought for me as well. I mean, it's possible that even some of these novellas are ghostwritten.
Sure.
Because,
it's always possible.
A lot of things for the traditional published writer are out of their control. And so Kira Cass may have had no control over this. And the people publishing this may have seen the success of Divergent and some of the other novellas, such as, Four's point of view that's coming from the Divergent series. If there are rabid fans who just can't wait to consume this stuff, then it's a good way to not only make money, but keep them keep them in with that author, I guess, so they don't forget. And as you say, one of the things that independent publishers or self-published writers can do much more easily is churn stuff out. We're not subject to holes that are available in store end cap slots or dump bins. We don't have to program to seasonal schedules. We can actually keep our readers filled with our stories if we wish, if they wish. So it definitely smacks of that. So my feeling is that this was rushed out to fill a production gap and suited the marketing crowd when they realised they could get their hands on it. I think personally I'd be embarrassed at releasing this. Maybe Kira Cass feels the same way. I don't know. You just wouldn't know. It's not great.
Yeah. You touched upon how there isn't much description or characterization really in this book. I mean, the prince was more interesting when we didn't know. It's almost like that old quote, the fool who opens. I don't remember the quote now, but like obviously, when someone's dumb and they don't talk, you're not sure.
Yes.
If they're smart or if they are an idiot.
Yes.
But you remove all doubt
when you get into their heads.
Get into their head, and that's what happened here.
Yes, that reminds me of Chauncey Gardner in Being There. Wonderful movie. So
the only reason I know about that is because I've seen like the Peter Sellers story. And,
right.
But yeah, so because it was a little before my time.
Oh, don't say things like that.
It was a little before my time, Robert. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so, let me just quickly explain that. He's a simple gardener who comes out with these metaphors to do with growing beautiful plants and maintaining the soil and fertilizing and taking your time. And the people around him just suddenly think that he's this guru dripping these drops of wisdom into everybody's life, and he becomes an advisor to all and sundry. And yet he's really a simple chap who sees the world in simple ways, and not necessarily better or worse than anyone. I don't mean to make fun of people who see the world in simple ways. But you're right about Prince Maxon here. We're left in no doubt as to what kind of... I mean, I said here, it's a male point of view, but Maxon seems more like a she. I was thinking maybe this is a setup for him to be gay later in the series.
Could be.
Yeah, I think that's the case for sure.
I think
some brilliant foreshadowing in this.
Here's my thought. People love this series. Good for her, whether it was her or her publisher, whatever. Good for them for giving people what they want. People obviously wanted this. They wanted this, Robert.
Yeah.
They wanted to see the prince's perspective. They're going to want to see Aspen's perspective. They want everything. They want everything there is to know.
Okay.
And so this is what they wanted. And the reviews are not damning. They're 4 and change.
Yeah.
Your books are 4 and change. My books are 4 and change.
Yeah.
Our books were reviewed on the same level as this book, which goes to show that this was what the majority of people wanted.
Yeah, I did say I just don't get this. And it's fair enough. It is. I'm not a target audience. And I did say, well, from a writer's perspective, though, who is this aimed at? I mean, it reads like a story for 9-year-old girls, but the content's way too adult, and the point of view is from a stupid nong of a teenage boy. So, I couldn't. Yeah. So maybe you're right. Super fans, mega fans. If
I had a mega popular series, I would probably also write novellas. I am writing a novella for Ted Saves the World, but that's more to help my carpal tunnel than anything else. If you are going to write a novella or a series of novellas, you need to have an inciting incident that adds to the story. There was nothing here that added to the story, and so it comes off a little fan fiction-y as a result. So you need, if you're going to write a different perspective, it needs to have a reason. There needs to be something different, probably even very early on, that has people saying, whoa, this is not what I expected to be reading. Like, imagine if beginning of this book, here, I'm going to rewrite this book. Beginning of this book, the prince sees the French princess and they steal off to make out somewhere secludedly. And the beginning of this is the prince dealing with his feelings for the girl and wondering, well, what am I going to do? He goes up to tell his father, and his father hands him the pile of people, and he sees America's face and falls in love with it immediately.
Right.
Like, already, boom.
Yeah.
Way better.
And then the
still kind of dumb.
Cliffhanger at the end.
Still kind of dumb.
That's okay. I'm going to make it more clever for you. The cliffhanger at the end is when Daphne, the French princess, gets abducted by the rebels.
See? That's great. That's great.
So, I mean, it's actually, you're coming into one of my takeaways, because I do think there's some value in this book, by the way. And I've been horribly critical because I just didn't like it. So, here's a spoiler for you. There's some brilliant foreshadowing in this book. Did you pick it up? It's just one line from King Maxon's dad. What was his name?
What was it?
Prince Max. He says, with a grunt, he crumpled the paper and threw it in the trash. Damn rebels. So understated. Brilliant. I mean, it sets up the whole ferocious and incredible rebels that are coming in the selection. I wanted to know more. Damn rebels. Sorry, Kira. I'm so sorry. You hate me.
You're so mean.
I'm mean.
You're the meanest.
Tell me it was ghostwritten, please. Are we going into takeaways? We better have before people just...
I think I should take 2 of these because yours is just going to be mean. Not that mine isn't mean. So, it's critical, but have a reason for writing a spin-off novella or short story. Have something new that people are going to find out, because you could write just standalone, regular, nothing that interesting happening, but we see the characters we love, so of course we're going to love it. Or you could give something else, create something, add to the whole reason that people love the series. Don't just deliver, over-deliver.
Yeah, that's really what novellas should be, not just filler that's kind of thrown in because you need something between the main courses. It's not right. And I think it's ripping off the reader. I had an interesting slant actually on the takeaways here. And this could apply to both readers groups and also writers critique groups. So for a writers critique group, read this book in your writers critique book, or even submit it to them without the author and tell them you wrote it. And then sit back and see what the criticism is. It'd be interesting to take it apart. And look, I'm sure there'd be vast swathes of, please show, don't tell, and the whole, RUE in the margins, resist the urge to explain. But it'd be really interesting, and also from a readers group who perhaps have been following the selection series, to read the novella and see what they think of it, and how it adds to the story. So I do think, even though I didn't like the story, there's definitely learning to be had from it. And as you say, it's a short read, so go read it.
Yeah, I agree. Good takeaway. I'd be interested to see what those groups would have to say as well.
Last takeaway is over to
Last takeaway kind of ties into number one. Don't assume that just because you're writing something shorter that it doesn't need the same level of attention. Sure, it's going to take less time, but you need to beef it up. Just like you would a novel, you need to add the active setting. You need to take away the crap. You need to keep things interesting. You need to make sure each scene pops. All those things need to happen in a novel and a novella. So make sure that you take the time to do that and you put the necessary energy into those areas.
The craft is the same. I mean, whether it's a 3-paragraph story or a 60-page story or a 400-page story or a George R.R. Martin epic. So, I personally, anyway, the story is a story. Hey, Bryan, I've got a comedy prompt of the week before you go with your serious one.
I like 2 prompts. You go first.
Can I do it?
You can do it, Robert.
Okay. Your main character turns out to have no brains. What stupid decisions do they make that endanger any idea that this will be a good story?
Oh, is it done? I wasn't sure if it was done. I was thinking about our listeners running away.
That's it. Now we've just lost 3 listeners, so now we only have 1.
Yeah. So my parents are gone, and my brother is gone as well. So now they're all gone.
Go give us a good prompt then.
Pick your favorite story of all time. Write a spin-off from the point of view of one of the side characters. What is the inciting incident of your story that compels you to tell this tale?
There you go. That's a better prompt. Yeah, that's fair enough. And that's a good reason to write a novella.
Yes. So you guys should answer that prompt on the splitbookreviews.com in the comments section. You can email it to us at podcast@thesplitbookreviews.com. And you can go to iTunes and leave a review of the show. We would love to see what you have to say because your comments help to make the show better or worse.
Indeed.
So hopefully better, though.
I was going to say.
Hopefully better.
That's a good one. I like that. We've taken in several comments so that we can make the show worse this week.
Yes, just a little bit worse. We're shooting for just going under the bar.
That's right. Only 4 or 5% worse. Don't want to sort of, set high expectations, really.
Ooh, no, that sounds terrible.
And of course, if you really like funny expressions, then go to YouTube. Watch it on YouTube.
We have some. We have at least 4 funny expressions.
That's right. I'm mastering the 5th, actually, ready for next week.
Good. You're ready for next week with Graceling by Kristen Kishore?
I'm really looking forward to this because we've been recommended this on a couple of different fronts now. And interestingly, also, my wife's hairdresser's assistant recommended it. And I know that sounds a little odd.
How many people need to do your wife's hair? Does she have a lot of hair?
She's got big hair. Yeah. And but they were just chatting, and she was, as usual, she tends to do this. She my husband writes, young adult sort of kids stuff. Oh, really? Because this happens to be her favorite genre. So they were, she put her onto the Split. So look, hello, I don't even know your name, but you may be listening. Thank you so much for recommending Graceling, and you'll find out why next week.
Yes, you will. You will.
You might find out some issues with the audio. We won't talk about that next week.
We'll talk about it next week. I'm probably going to read most of this one on paper because audio is not my cup of tea, which may be the reason that we did the Prince this week. Okay, so thank you guys for listening to The Split. We really appreciate it. Come back next week for Graceling, and for Robert Scanlon of the Dreamer Chronicles, I'm Bryan Cohen of the Ted Saves the World series. Thank you again, and we'll talk to you next week.
And to satisfy a listener's request, we got a split.
Thank you guys for watching. Somewhere on this page is a subscribe button to the Split channel. We do reviews every week. We would love it if you followed us every single week. Isn't that right, Robert?
That's exactly right. Follow us now. Hit the subscribe button.
Do it.